West Africa, a land of immense potential and opportunity, but also the battleground of two of the most dangerous underground forces, the smuggling gangs in Côte d'Ivoire and the infamous drug cartels in Ghana. One operates quietly, devastating the environment and depleting valuable resources. The other openly spreads fear through drugs and violence. But who truly controls the game? How do they differ? And what defines the power of each organization? Join us as we uncover the shocking truth about the covert war in West Africa, where not only resources but the lives and futures of millions are at stake. When discussing the underworld in West Africa, organizational structure is the first aspect to analyze in order to understand how these criminal forces operate. Within this landscape, the smuggling gangs in Côte d'Ivoire and the drug cartels in Ghana represent two entirely different models, not only in terms of power distribution but also in their adaptability to the environment. In Côte d'Ivoire, smuggling gangs operate with a loose, decentralized structure. These groups are often formed from small communities, bound more by economic interests than by tight organizational discipline. Each group is responsible for a specific part of the work, ranging from illegal gold and diamond extraction to transportation or forging export documents. This allows them to be flexible, easily dissolving when under threat and quickly restructuring at a new location. However, this fragmentation often leads to internal conflicts over interests. Sometimes, disputes between smaller factions escalate into violence, causing the surrounding communities to bear the consequences. Notably, the smuggling gangs in Côte d'Ivoire rely heavily on local networks. The prevalence of corruption at various levels creates an ecosystem in which these groups can operate almost openly. For instance, border officials or checkpoint personnel are often bribed to ignore smuggled goods. This raises the question: is the inefficiency of the public administration system a catalyst for the existence of these gangs? When authorities lack resources or are complicit, who truly controls the borders? In stark contrast, Ghana's drug cartels are organized with a strictly hierarchical structure. At the top are the kingpins, who control the entire supply chain, from sourcing drugs in South America to transit points in Europe or North America. Beneath them are intermediate managers, including financial experts, logistics coordinators, and supervisors who oversee operations. At the lowest level, hundreds or even thousands of ground operatives serve as couriers, enforcers, or workers performing high-risk tasks such as drug transactions or eliminating rivals. This system ensures tight control while enabling the cartels to scale their operations easily. Another critical factor in the structure of Ghana's cartels is their professionalism. They not only rely on social connections but also employ modern management tools such as financial tracking software, GPS for monitoring shipments, and professional legal teams to counter law enforcement. This makes Ghanaian cartels nearly unbreakable. Some reports suggest that drug lords even bribe international officials to protect their interests, something rarely seen with the smaller gangs in Côte d'Ivoire. But what accounts for the stark differences in organizational structures between these groups? Part of the reason may lie in the nature of the goods they trade. Smuggling gangs in Côte d'Ivoire focus on gold, diamonds, or wildlife, resources that are often easier to trace but do not require complex systems for control. Meanwhile, drugs, particularly cocaine and methamphetamine, require a continuous and stable supply chain with tight security at every stage. Additionally, as Ghanaian cartels expand into international markets, they face larger competitors and more sophisticated security forces. This forces them to operate like a legitimate corporation to maintain their advantage. However, the tightly controlled structure of Ghana's cartels is not always an advantage. Excessive control can sometimes make them rigid and less adaptable to sudden changes. For example, when a critical link in the chain is broken, the entire system can grind to a halt. In contrast, the decentralized and flexible nature of Côte d'Ivoire's gangs allows them to quickly restructure and recover after crackdowns. This poses an intriguing question. In a volatile underworld, is flexibility or organization the key to survival? Another aspect to consider is how these groups interact with local communities. In Côte d'Ivoire, smuggling gangs are often closely tied to small communities, where they provide jobs or financial support in exchange for loyalty. While this can reduce resistance from the population, it also creates a cycle of economic dependency. Conversely, in Ghana, cartels typically operate separately from the community, intervening only when necessary or when their interests are threatened. This approach helps them maintain a facade of secrecy but also makes them more isolated when targeted by law enforcement operations. Overall, both organizational structures have their own strengths and weaknesses, suited to the goals and operations of each group. But could there come a day when the flexibility of Côte d'Ivoire's gangs becomes a liability, as international organizations begin to collaborate against them? And will the professionalism of Ghana's cartels be enough to sustain their empire? Or will their rigid structure lead to their downfall under growing pressure from international forces? These questions are not merely theoretical but directly impact the ongoing fight against crime in West Africa. To gain deeper insights, we need to further analyze how these organizations operate in practice, a subject that will be explored in greater detail in the next section. When it comes to operational methods, the smuggling gangs of Côte d'Ivoire and the drug cartels of Ghana demonstrate two vastly different strategies. From market approaches to the deployment of manpower and technology, these differences not only reflect the types of goods they trade but also highlight disparities in scale, ambition, and risk management capabilities within their operations. In Côte d'Ivoire, smuggling gangs primarily focus on traditional commodities such as gold, diamonds, and wildlife. These are high-value goods that require discretion in transportation and transactions. The gangs exploit the region's natural terrain, dense forests, rivers, and cross-border trails, to conceal their smuggling activities from government surveillance. They often use simple means of transport like small trucks, wooden boats, or even bicycles to move goods across poorly monitored borders. Another common tactic is to break shipments into smaller loads to minimize losses in case of capture. For instance, instead of transporting a large quantity of diamonds or gold across the border, gangs split the goods into smaller portions, assigning them to individual couriers. These couriers, often local farmers or residents, are paid modest sums to undertake this risky task. This approach not only reduces the potential loss of goods but also complicates investigations for authorities. A noteworthy factor in the operations of Côte d'Ivoire's gangs is their reliance on corruption. At many border areas, bribery has become an unofficial part of the smuggling process. Officials are paid to turn a blind eye to illicit shipments or even to provide forged documents that allow smugglers to bypass checks. This creates a vicious cycle where local authorities, instead of dismantling smuggling networks, become enablers of their activities. In contrast, Ghana's drug cartels operate on a completely different scale and level of sophistication. Drugs, particularly cocaine and methamphetamine, require not only a complex supply chain but also the ability to overcome numerous legal and technical barriers to reach international markets. As a result, Ghanaian cartels have developed more advanced methods, leveraging technology and strategy to maximize efficiency and security. One of the most common tactics is concealing drugs in export containers at Tema Port, one of West Africa's largest seaports. Cartels often use legitimate companies as fronts, declaring goods such as agricultural produce, handicrafts, or industrial equipment. Within these shipments, drugs are disguised with chemical layers or packed in materials designed to evade detection by scanners at seaports. The sophistication of these concealment techniques often requires months or even years for security forces to uncover and decode. Additionally, Ghanaian cartels use high-tech tools to monitor the entire transportation process. GPS systems are employed to track shipments, ensuring they are not lost or intercepted by law enforcement. Some cartels even hire cybersecurity experts to hack into port management systems, disrupting inspections or altering shipment data. These methods not only maintain secrecy but also enhance the cartel's ability to manage risks within their supply chain. However, the operations of Ghanaian cartels extend beyond drug transportation. A significant part of their strategy involves establishing distribution networks in international markets. These cartels often collaborate with criminal organizations in Europe or North America, supplying drugs wholesale. This allows them to maintain control over the upstream supply chain without directly engaging in smaller, riskier retail markets, minimizing their exposure to law enforcement in foreign territories. A contentious question arises. Which operational method is more effective? The smuggling gangs of Côte d'Ivoire, with their flexibility and discretion, may evade many short-term risks. But can this approach withstand increasingly sophisticated international crackdowns? Meanwhile, Ghanaian cartels, though advantaged by technology and organization, are more easily targeted by large-scale operations due to their complexity and massive scale. Moreover, the societal impacts of these methods differ significantly. In Côte d'Ivoire, the reliance on local labor for smuggling activities has deepened economic dependency, creating a cycle of poverty and inequality. In Ghana, drug cartels not only contribute to addiction crises but also erode public trust in legal systems through bribery and violence. Overall, both methods have distinct strengths and weaknesses, reflecting not only the characteristics of each organization but also the social and political contexts in which they operate. But what happens when international forces ramp up their campaigns in West Africa? Will the discretion of Côte d'Ivoire's gangs ensure their long-term survival, or will the sophistication of Ghanaian cartels serve as their weapon to withstand all pressures? This is the question that will shape the fight against crime in the region in the coming years. To gain a deeper understanding of the impact of these methods, we must delve into the nature of their crimes and their consequences, a topic to be explored in the next section. The criminal nature of Côte d'Ivoire's smuggling gangs and Ghana's drug cartels is not merely a reflection of profit-driven motives but also a manifestation of how they impact society, the environment, and human lives. Delving into these aspects reveals a multi-dimensional picture of the destruction and enforcement of power by these two organizations. In Côte d'Ivoire, smuggling gangs primarily operate in the domains of natural resource exploitation and wildlife trafficking. Their crimes are quiet, but no less destructive. Ancient forests, often regarded as the green lungs of the region, are decimated for illegal gold and diamond mining. Rivers, once lifelines for communities, are poisoned with chemicals like mercury, widely used in gold extraction. Reports suggest that over 30% of Côte d'Ivoire's tropical forests have been lost in the past 2 decades, largely due to illegal mining activities. However, environmental destruction is not their only consequence. These gangs directly exploit labor in mining zones, with many children, some as young as 10 years old, forced to work under hazardous conditions for meager wages. Accidents, such as mine collapses or suffocation due to lack of oxygen, are frequent but rarely reported. The presence of these gangs not only devastates the natural environment but also fosters social instability, perpetuating cycles of poverty and corruption. The gangs in Côte d'Ivoire wield power in a manner that sparks controversy. Instead of overt violence, they rely heavily on bribery and subtle intimidation to achieve their goals. Local officials are often coerced into cooperation, facing sophisticated forms of retaliation such as reputational damage or property sabotage if they resist. This strategy enables the gangs to operate sustainably while eroding trust in public administration. Can a nation achieve sustainable development when shadow powers hold significant sway over administrative decisions? In contrast, the criminality of Ghana's drug cartels is overt, violent, and relentless. These cartels go beyond drug trafficking, extending into money laundering, human trafficking, and even cyber attacks. One of their most terrifying attributes is their readiness to use violence to maintain control. Bloody clashes with rival gangs, assassinations of officials, and direct confrontations with police are common in some regions of Ghana. The stories of Ghanaian drug lords often carry a mythical aura, but behind the facade lies a grim reality. Some kingpins control entire communities by creating parallel systems to the government, providing jobs and financial aid to the people. However, this veneer of generosity conceals brutal realities. Anyone daring to oppose or obstruct the cartel's operations faces dire consequences. Witnesses recount chilling accounts of retribution, including entire families of informants being wiped out as a warning to others. It's noteworthy that Ghanaian cartels use violence not only to defend their territories but also as a tool to send messages. A single elimination of a rival isn't merely about removing competition but also asserting dominance and power. Scenes of individuals murdered in broad daylight or armed gangs patrolling the streets have become symbols of cartel authority. This instills fear in communities while posing significant challenges to government efforts to reclaim control. A pressing question arises between the quiet operations of Côte d'Ivoire's smuggling gangs and the overt, brutal tactics of Ghana's cartels. Which poses a greater threat? One wreaks long-term havoc on the environment and communities through covert activities, while the other destabilizes regions immediately with violence and psychological terror. Each form of crime carries its own consequences, fueling intense debates about the best strategies to counter them. Furthermore, the global impact of these crimes must be considered. While Ghana's cartels pose a direct threat to international security due to their transcontinental drug trade, Côte d'Ivoire's smuggling gangs represent a latent danger tied to climate change and resource depletion. This may explain why the international community, despite significant efforts to dismantle the cartels, has not yet devoted sufficient attention to resource smuggling gangs in West Africa. What, then, is the solution? Should efforts focus on dismantling Ghanaian cartels with direct and forceful interventions? Or is a more comprehensive approach required to address Côte d'Ivoire's smuggling gangs? The answer hinges on how governments and international organizations balance short-term and long-term interests, weighing immediate security threats against the need to safeguard resources for future generations. In the next section, we will engage in a broader discussion, piecing together the full picture of the impact these organizations have, not just on West Africa but on the world at large. Can West Africa escape the grip of this criminal vortex? Or will these underground forces continue to dominate? Stay tuned as we delve further. When looking at the bigger picture, the smuggling gangs in Côte d'Ivoire and the drug cartels in Ghana are not merely two independent crime models. They are two parts of a complex network, reflecting deeper issues within the social, economic, and political structures of West Africa. The impacts they cause extend beyond the regional scope, spreading and influencing international relations. But to understand more deeply, we need to place them in a broader context, where every aspect, from the environment, society, to politics, is illuminated. First, let's talk about environmental impact, an often overlooked factor in discussions about crime. In Côte d'Ivoire, illegal gold and diamond mining activities by smuggling gangs have left severe consequences. Forests are cut down to make way for mining. Rivers are polluted with toxic chemicals. And areas once rich in ecosystems have turned into barren lands. The problem lies not only in the current destruction but also in the long-term future of the entire region. When natural resources are depleted, communities dependent on them will lose their means of livelihood. These individuals, left with no other choice, are driven into the vortex of crime, working for the very gangs that robbed them of their resources. Conversely, in Ghana, the impact of drug cartels emphasizes the social aspect. As drugs flood communities, not only the individuals using them are affected, but families, friends, and even entire social structures are shaken. The rising addiction rates have led to serious public health consequences, from the spread of infectious diseases to the decline in labor capacity of an entire generation. Meanwhile, the drug cartels create an underground economy where young people see no future other than becoming part of the criminal network. But it's not just the environment and society that bear the brunt. The political systems in both countries are also deeply influenced by these criminal organizations. In Côte d'Ivoire, dependence on corruption has turned local governments into pawns in the smuggling gangs game. In Ghana, the influence is even more dangerous. The drug cartels, with vast financial resources, not only bribe officials but also interfere in national policies. Some reports suggest these organizations have funded election campaigns or manipulated election outcomes to place their allies in power. This raises a critical question. How can a country combat crime when its leadership system is infiltrated by the very entities it needs to dismantle? Moreover, international relations must also be considered. Ghana's drug cartels, with their global networks, have turned West Africa into an international drug transit hub. This not only affects the security of European and North American nations, the destinations of these drug shipments, but also puts pressure on neighboring West African countries. Transport routes often pass through Nigeria, Benin, or Togo, drawing these nations into the problem. Meanwhile, in Côte d'Ivoire, smuggling of resources does not receive equivalent international attention, even though it directly contributes to climate change, one of the world's most pressing issues. However, the most notable aspect is how these organizations impact community psychology. In both countries, crime is no longer an anomaly, it has become part of daily life. People living near mining areas in Côte d'Ivoire or in communities controlled by cartels in Ghana have had to learn to accept and adapt to the underworld's presence. This creates a dangerous cycle, where the normalization of crime makes combating it more challenging than ever. A significant question arises. How can this cycle be broken? Current efforts, from campaigns to dismantle Ghana's drug cartels to forest protection programs in Côte d'Ivoire, seem insufficient to tackle the scale of the problem. Part of the issue lies in the lack of coordination between nations and international organizations. While Ghana's drug cartels operate with a global network, anti-crime campaigns are often limited to a national level. Similarly, resource protection efforts in Côte d'Ivoire lack international support, even though the environmental destruction has borderless consequences. Another problem is the approach. Are we too focused on dismantling criminal organizations while neglecting to address the root causes? Poverty, lack of job opportunities, and corruption are key factors that allow these organizations to thrive. Without addressing these root causes, can current campaigns truly yield sustainable results? Finally, the most crucial factor is the role of the community. No matter how many campaigns are launched by international organizations or governments, real change can only occur when local people rise up and say, "No" to crime. But for that to happen, they need support, not just financial aid but also education, training, and development opportunities. Can we create a future where communities are no longer dependent on the underworld? Or will we remain trapped in the cycle of crime and injustice? These questions are not just issues for Côte d'Ivoire or Ghana but for the entire world. The fight against crime in West Africa is not an isolated battle, it is part of a global struggle to protect humanity, the environment, and the future. The answer lies in solidarity, in recognizing that any issue occurring in one corner of the world can affect us all. Only when we act together can organizations like Côte d'Ivoire's smuggling gangs or Ghana's cartels truly be defeated. West Africa is not only the epicenter of some of the region's largest criminal organizations but also a proving ground for the international community's resolve in combating the underworld. So, what do you think about the differences between Côte d'Ivoire's smuggling gangs and Ghana's cartels? Which one poses the greater threat? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more captivating content. The journey into the underworld has just begun.